Morning everybody, how you all doing? So if you haven't noticed, most of you probably have, that the communists, the far left, Marxists, whatever you want to call them, are having a bit of a meltdown lately. And you know, I'm enjoying it. I've just got the popcorn and I'm just watching them have this massive meltdown because people in their own country are raising their national flag. I know. Ooh, what a shocker, eh? You know, those evil people. How dare you be patriotic in your own country and raise your own national flags? How dare you? And of course, the lefty nut jobs are having an absolute meltdown because of the rise of the patriot movement. And they're terrified of it because they know that we outnumber them, because they're a tiny minority and we're a huge majority. They saw that on the Unite the Kingdom march, when they could only muster 10,000 people. Whereas on the Unite the Kingdom march, there was, let's be realistic about this, there's probably 1.5 million people on that march. To be liberal about it, I know people may contest and say there were more, but let's be liberal and say there were 1.5 million people, about an average, on that march. And that scared the absolute shit out of the lefties. It really did. Because they were starting to believe their own hype that they were a majority in this country, mainly because the mainstream media always seems to amplify their voices, and so they started to believe their own hype that they're the majority in this country and the patriot movement was the minority. Well, on that day, on the 13th of September, their entire worldview got flipped on its head because they realized, no, you're not a majority, you're a minority. And so ever since that date, they've been kicking off, they've been throwing tantrums, they've been calling people raising the national flag racists and xenophobes and all this kind of rubbish, which is absolute nonsense. And the main reason I'm making this video today is just to tell people and just say, the far left, the Marxists, the communists, they have no moral high ground. They have this false sense of superiority. You only have to look at their comments on social media or their videos to see how condescending they are towards people. They think they're superior. They think they're morally superior to everyone else. And the reality is, they're not. They're everything they claim others to be. They are intolerant, they are bigoted, they are racist themselves. And when you hold a mirror up to them, it's like a crucifix, because, you know, I can have debates. I can go into a lefty live stream and debate them, and I know I can win. Why? Why do I know I can win? Because I can bring facts and evidence with me to prove that their beliefs are bullshit. They can't do that to my live stream. They can't come into my live stream and bring facts and evidence and prove that I'm wrong about things. This is why whenever you see citizen journalists, you see Charlie Veach and other people trying to have conversations with members of the opposing protest, you'll have people walking about within that crowd telling them not to talk, not to speak to people. They shut down conversation. They don't like debate. This is why they believe in censorship. They have to have censorship because that's the only way they can win an argument, is to shut down debate completely. Because in a free marketplace of ideas, their ideas simply don't stand. They don't stand up to scrutiny. They don't stand up to evidence checks. They don't. I can always bring evidence with me to prove why communism is barbaric and why it's the same as, if not worse, as Nazism and fascism. They're two sides of the same coin. Communism comes from the same group as National Socialism and fascism. It's all based on socialism, the whole thing. So when you see them parading around the streets with their communist flags, it may as well be a swastika, because it's exactly the same thing. Don't forget, this ideology, this communist ideology, is responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths around the world, and it's still going on today. So why it's allowed? Why is communism given a free pass when ideologies like fascism and Nazism are not given a free pass? Quite rightly so, by the way. They shouldn't be given a free pass, and neither should communism. But this is what they do. They act like they're morally superior. I just want to show you this. I'm going off a tangent a bit here, but this is amazing. I don't know what sort of tree this is, but I think might be a crabapple tree. But look at that. Nothing says England like an apple tree out in the middle of nowhere, doesn't it? Whilst I'm on my walk, that's amazing. And this is probably where the deer come at night. I've seen lots of deer around this area, so they're probably coming for the apples at night. So yeah, look at that. That's awesome. I love that. It's amazing. So yeah, the communists are no better than the Nazis or the fascists. They're really not. And like I said, I've always said this, that in Nazi Germany, the communists and the National Socialists were never arguing over morality, over different things. They were arguing over power. If the communists had got into power in 1930s Germany, they would have done exactly the same thing that the Nazis did. They'd have probably come up with a final solution, which is something they did in Soviet Russia. When you look at the gulags and how many people died in the gulags, people who disagreed with the state were just disappeared and taken away. Pretty much like what happened in Nazi Germany and other places that are communist, look, North Korea. And they'll always come up with the same excuse. Well, they implemented that version of communism wrong. Tom, Generation X, has touched on this recently. This is the excuse they always come up with. Well, it wasn't implemented right that time around. The thing is, to implement the sort of ideology that communism is, you have to have an authoritarian state. You have to make people comply to the batshit crazy policies that you're proposing, because that's the only way you can get normal, sane people to comply with these things. Because any sane people would realise that communism, Nazism, and fascism are just really, really bad ideologies. Not just evil, bad ideologies. They destroy countries, and it's not the sort of regime you want to live under. So when they come out and start parading around thinking they've got some kind of moral high ground, when in reality they don't have any moral high ground at all. Their ideology is just as shit as Nazism, fascism, and any false sense of superiority is just that, it's false. And they're morally bankrupt people. Absolutely morally bankrupt people. Look at how many of these people turned violent when people just go up to them and ask them questions. How many times do we see these so-called peaceful protesters shoving placards in people's faces and trying to hit them and punch them just for asking them a question? And patriots, we don't have to hide behind false camouflage like a name like Stand Up to Racism or Hope Not Hate to try and put a bit of camouflage, to try and convince people we're really nice people. We don't have to do that in the patriot movement. We are exactly what we are, what it says on the tin. We're patriots, plain and simple. And these people can't do that. They have to hide their true nature behind fake names like Stand Up to Racism and Hope Not Hate, when actually they're the opposite of those things. They are racist themselves. They are just filled with hatred for anything that isn't them. And so don't get distracted by their false sense of superiority and their false sense of righteousness, because they don't have it. They have no righteousness. They have no moral compass whatsoever. So this is Vindicator signing off.